Hi, welcome back to another edition of the Coach's Corner. With me, as always, Clayton Hoford. Right now, we are going to review the Seahawks versus Washington football team. I think the big area of emphasis here is outside of Dwayne Haskins after game situation, in game at least, he looked, pretty decent. I mean, I know he had the two picks, but he looked like maybe there's something there. He kind of finally started to look like the first round pick that Washington spent on Haskins. So they look pretty competitive. I still think that they would have much rather have had Alex Smith playing for him. But it is what it is. But I think the big thing was Washington threw the ball 55 times. And like I said, the two picks with Haskins, but 55 times. This is the same team we were talking about with Alex Smith that likes to run the ball with Gibson, likes to give Peyton Barber some of the power runs, and also McKissick threw kind of like the passing game, which is kind of an extension of the run, anyways. But 55 times, I think Logan Thomas was the leading receiver, the tight end. I think the quarterback converted tight end, if I'm not mistaken. And then Scary Terry, of course, kind of led the team with receptions. But 55 times is not what Riverboat Ron and the Washington football team wants. Secondly, Russell Wilson struggled against that Washington front seven, and we've talked about it before. I mean, it's first round galore on that defensive line. So it wasn't really a surprise that Russell kind of struggled a little bit against that front seven. The front seven, I think, really kept them alive in the game. But surprisingly, when it came to stopping the run, Washington gave up 181 yards on the ground. They had a couple big plays to Carlos Hyde, and then Chris Carson was just kind of consistently gashing them a little bit. Decent yards per carry, but Hyde kind of had a lot of the really long runs. But Russell Wilson was also efficient with his legs, and he's one of those guys who's really, really sneaky good when he gets outside the pocket. We're talking about Kirk Cousins not really being that athletic of a guy on a rollout. Well, you best watch out for Russell Wilson, because he is one of those guys that is athletic enough to beat you on a rollout. And then lastly, this is still Washington's division to lose, really. I mean, they're still in the driver's seat. The Dallas Cowboys are very quietly the number 2 team in that division right now because of the Giants' loss. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think if I'm a Washington fan, or if I'm looking at it, from maybe a Washington standpoint, evaluating them, I'm optimistic, just because they haven't had probably their most electric player. That's Antonio Gibson, right? We've seen what he's been able to do with the ball in his hand, given a full workload. So you look at that, you look at no Alex Smith holding them down, and they still competed with what's probably going to end up being a playoff team in the Seattle Seahawks. I'm taking this all day long. I'm taking this as a positive. There are no moral victories. There are no such thing as a good loss. But you look at this and you say, it could have been a lot worse. And there's a lot of positives to take from that. You hit on a lot of it. The game plan didn't call for what Riverboat Ron probably would have wanted, throwing it 55 times with your backup quarterback. Never ideal. You look at throwing it that many times paired with giving up 181 on the ground. It's supposed to be your strength. Is getting, stopping the run, having a strong defense, and you just get gashed. I think that's probably a result of them probably game planning to stop Russ and DK and Tyler Lockett more so it is than respecting Chris Carson and Carlos Hyde. And that was it. Just, we've seen the Seahawks been able to do this. It's one of their strengths is, okay, if you're going to give us the pass, we're going to pass. If you're going to give us the run, we're going to run. You never really know which Seahawks offense you're going to get that night. But yeah, ultimately you look at Washington and you just say, hey, this is a team that's playing competitive football with very good teams. We've seen them pick off the Steelers. We've seen them play good with Seahawks. We know how explosive that Seahawks offense can be. And ultimately you look at this and say, hey, this isn't a team that we could take lightly because of the state of the NFC East. This isn't a team we can just brush off if we play them in the playoffs. This is a team we got to prepare for. We got to do our homework for, and we have to show up and we have to play disciplined assignment football to defeat them, or somebody's going to go home early to a undermanned Washington football team.
I totally agree with you on that. Kind of like the Bears. The Seahawks the Washington football team and the Seahawks the Washington football team and the Bears are two teams you really don't want to see in the playoffs, just because their style of football travels well. We talked about both teams have had slumps throughout the year. I mean, but they're peaking. Even though the Washington football team lost, they're still, I think, peaking. They just ran into arguably one of the better teams in the NFC. And I know we've kind of talked about the Seahawks defense, but they're a different defense when they have Jamal Adams healthy. I mean, completely different. And the team in general starting to get healthy, which I think is going to help them. Do I think that they have a defense that's going to do really well in the playoffs? No, I think they're going to have to outscore people. But as far as Washington and Chicago, they had their struggles throughout the season, but they're starting to figure it out because they're able to run the football and play good defense. And like we said, that travels well. And, luckily for the Washington football team, if they win their division, at least they can host a playoff game, where Chicago will still have to do it on the road, which we've talked about, how much outside of sleeping in your own bed is home field advantage this year in the playoffs. Probably not a whole lot, but I think that both, the Bears and, in this case, since we're talking about the Washington football team, are peaking at the right time.
No, I couldn't agree more, and I don't really feel like there's much else you could say in regards to that. For the Washington football team, you look at the Seahawks, just another win. The thing you don't want to deal with them is just the experience under center with Russ, just a guy that ultimately believes he can win in any situation. We've seen him make improbable comebacks before. Defense is kind of getting its stuff together a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't the putrid defense we saw at the beginning of the season. A little more pulled together, a little more poised, cool and collected, getting more stops, it seems like. Running the ball extremely well. We know they can do that, and we know they can throw the ball. So ultimately, this is just if you're playing the Seahawks, you're kind of just praying that they, you don't get the full strength Seahawks. Maybe they have an off night or something, or the offensive rhythm is just out of sync, because really this is a team that if the defense has your number, you're not going to be able to outscore them with the weapons they have. If you're trying to keep, if you've got a potent offense and you're struggling, they've got the ability to take the air out of the football and run it down your throat, as we see 181 yards on a very good rushing defense. This is just a multifaceted Seahawks team, and I don't think it's the most talented Seahawks team we've seen, obviously, because we've seen some very talented ones, but this is one that I think people are sleeping on just because of how Russ has cooled down. People aren't taking them seriously. I don't think we understand how good the Seahawks actually are and how competitive they are. This is a year where truly you can't really say this team is this much better than this team and this team. It seems like every week we're just getting – and part of it is, like we keep saying, the lack of home field advantage. We're seeing pure, unadulterated football. We're not seeing fans mess with the mind. We're seeing focused football and some of the purest football we've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. You can hear everything on the field, too.
Exactly. You're getting all you can ever want for as a football purist and junkie watching these games in this season. So because of that reason, you can't take any team for granted week in and week out.
I totally agree with you, but let us know what you think in the comments section. If you have a question, don't be afraid to ask it. We'll answer it in the next series next week. Also, don't be afraid to like, comment, subscribe, turn on notification bells, and thanks for joining us on the Coach's Corner.